This is not a cheerful segment. A colossal black pill might be the best way of describing it. It turns out that the grooming gang scandal has been continuing almost unabated since the story was first broken. If there is some light to be found in all of this, it's that some excellent investigative reporting has been done by The Times in particular on this subject. And shout out to one of the last real investigative journalists remaining in British media, namely George Greenwood, for bringing this information to light. And here's his profile there. He's quite proud of his unreasonable persistence and activity in his investigations, branded so by the people he's investigating, which is, I think, the highest accolade. George recently posted a long thread collating the work of months and years investigating the shambolic response by police to the grooming gang scandal. And let's just go through his findings. I'm going to read it through. Police have been accused of failing the victims of grooming gangs after an investigation found the force at the centre of the Rotherham scandal was still not recording the ethnicities of suspected child abusers. So wasn't recording the ethnicities.
This is years after we finally got the whole thing exposed, years after the J report, still not doing it.
No, they've been specifically told multiple times to do it, and they're not doing it. South Yorkshire Police blocked the release of their internal intelligence document that set out serious failings in how it handled child sexual offences for 14 months, that I first requested in August 2020. It took 2 separate regulatory complaints to force disclosure. So he's done the work, is what you're saying, to try and crowbar this information about police incompetence out of there.
But it's also very telling. He didn't just put a Freedom of Information request in. He then presumably had them tell him to go F himself.
Yep.
Twice, and he had to put in 2 regulatory complaints to even get anywhere with this.
Yes.
I mean, real levels of institutional resistance to him finding out what's going on.
Yeah. It's not exactly an open and transparent society, is it? The document showed officers routinely failed to log the ethnicity of those suspected of sexually abusing minors, with the highest failure rate being in the Rotherham district itself, where in 67% of cases it went unrecorded. Interesting. This is despite race being a key issue in the original scandal, with the J Review finding some child protection professionals were reluctant to address the hidden crime pattern for fear of being thought racist.
If you point out that the man who, well, the nonce, is Asian, therefore you're a racist. Like, but they are all Asian. All the guys with the rest of the day governor are all Asian, but don't put it down on the sheet. Why not? What are you hiding?
It's quite remarkable. Why is the fear of being thought racist so crippling on this level that it prevents the police from tackling child rape? It's incredible. Jay advised that agencies should acknowledge the suspected model of localized grooming of young white girls by men of Pakistani heritage, instead of being inhibited by the fear of affecting community relations. And again, this is a review, I believe, in the Times, was the J report that broke this. They're not exactly raging, frothing racists, and it's so obvious that they can come out and say that it is men of Pakistani heritage. We all know it if you've been following this scandal. It's one of those truths that is only not really talked about in mainstream media. And he continues, other failings identified in the report included that Rotherham was still seen as a hotspot for the sexual abuse of children, because it is. The force feared it was recording fewer cases of child sexual exploitation because of competing demands to investigate other claims such as County Line's drug gangs. Basically, we were busy. They kicked it to the bottom of the priority list because they didn't want to deal with it. Our police.
I don't believe that's good enough, though, because there's that aspect. I am sure that they are not doing their jobs. That's ultimately believable. But the fact that they didn't want to record the ethnicities of those they were arresting for this situation, to this day, I mean, years and years after all the scandals come out, tells you that it's not just laziness.
No, it's not. There's an element of deliberate cover-up here, isn't there?
Still. I mean, you even got the local MP, Sarah Champion, openly saying this is a problem that has to be fixed. I mean, the rot in the police, I don't know how deep it goes.
Yeah, well, we'll get on to that. Officers couldn't fully search their missing persons database, impacting on the force's ability to deal with missing persons effectively, which is a key flag for CSE. So that's just saying, our software wasn't working, Governor. It's not our fault. Key information from schools and sexual health clinics was not readily available for the police. So it's the school's fault, apparently, not the police. just blaming other people. They want more power and more information, basically.
Are all the police in Rotherham blind? Have they all have their eyes poked out? They've got no other means of assessing someone's ethnicity. Mm-hmm. I have to check the school documents for the I can't possibly look at.
Yep, and Andrew Norfolk writes in the paper today on some of the lessons still to be learned from the Rotherham scandal. So let's go through some of the takeaways from this article. It feels horribly familiar, he begins. More than 10 years after the Times first investigated the targeted abuse of girls by organised groups of men, to realise that child protection authorities are still making similar mistakes is deeply worrying. Calling these mistakes, I think, is quite charitable, because it doesn't seem like there's anything accidental.
Hang on, we know it's not a mistake by the admission of the J report. As you mentioned, the famous quote
being...
fear
of racism.
We didn't investigate because of fear of... That's not a mistake.
No.
That's an action you took consciously. Mm-hmm. You knew that you would be accused of being a racist, and therefore you consciously decided not to do your job.
Yeah. Much has changed since the autumn of 2010. Back then, it was a crime hiding in plain sight. Many police forces...
What's the change? Okay.
Many police forces and care professionals were so reluctant to tackle the street grooming model of child sexual exploitation that they refused to acknowledge its existence.
I suppose the change is we acknowledge its existence now?
I'm not sure they even do.
I suppose as a nation we do?
Alexis Jay's report created headlines in the summer of 2014 with its finding that failings by social workers and police between 1997 and 2013 allowed 1,400 local girls to fall victim to appalling abuse by men who were largely of Pakistani heritage. And I believe that's the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? That was just the ones, the provable cases. And that's spanning years. This has spanned decades at this point.
And that's one town?
Yes.
One town in a country of 64 million people.
Now, from my point of view, the idea that the police are on the side of British civil society seems ludicrous in light of their response to the grooming gang scandal. As an institution, the police seems to have no interest in protecting the British public. They cavort through our streets in annual pride parades, they cruise around in rainbow-coloured clown cars or deck themselves out in the regalia of diversity, as we've covered on this channel, and they seem far more committed to this performative activism than to the protection and safety of the people. Let's have a look at what South Yorkshire Police has to say on its Twitter. Today we've changed our profile photo to the rainbow flag in support of International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia. This from 2018. If we scroll down, there's more and more of this. Just diversity. Oh, we're committed to tackling hate crime in all its forms, except anti-white grooming gangs, apparently.
Sorry, did one of the nonces make that image? I mean, that's the thing in my mind. Because remember, the statement from the police is we didn't investigate out of fear of being called racist. And yet you're perpetuating the culture here, love, not hate there. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking in my mind, if a nonce had written that, you could see the narrative following. Don't investigate me or you racist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the big heart and the very little heart as well. You're right. There's something in the imagery that's disturbing. If we go
we
down
don't want
further,
hate.
Hate crime can include things like physical assault, damage to property, offensive graffiti, arson, and inciting hatred online.
Or arresting individuals involved in noncery. That's hate crime as well, is it? Because you didn't do it. You didn't do these things on the basis that you were scared.
Mm-hmm. And then the next one, hate hurts. Report it and put a stop to it. And then a picture of people mostly from an ethnic background with hate makes me feel and an ellipsis. Okay, fair enough. Visit our website to hear from the Hate Crime Force lead Superintendent Pullman about our commitment to tackling the problem, the difference between hate crimes and hate incidents, and how to report them.
Hashtag IDHobbit 2018, hashtag LGBT, hashtag diversity.
Yeah, well done, South Yorkshire Police. Now, this is from 2018, so you might say, oh, what if they've got better in the last few years? Yeah, right. Well, how have their priorities developed in 2021? Let's have a listen to the Christmas message of the Rotherham District Commander. If we can play from 227. Here we go.
What you can also look to see going forward is more officers on the street through our Uplift programme. We've got our Race Equality and Inclusion Hub, which is all about making sure that our district, our service is a true representation of our public as we do our recruitment drives. And of course, violence against women and girls is taken seriously in this force as it is any other force. And not only will we make sure that you are safer on the streets going forward, but that you actually feel safer.
What do you reckon? Is there something missing from the superintendent of Rotherham District Police Force there, do you think? Well, I've listened to the whole thing, and there is no mention of grooming gangs in any of their priorities. This is actually the closest they get, mentioning the generic category of violence against women and girls in the same breath as diversity and inclusion. Perhaps a bit more of one and a bit less of the other. Now, Steve Chapman, from that, as far as I can tell, seems like a decent bloke. You might enjoy having a pint with him at the pub. But that's not enough when you have a position of responsibility that oversees a disaster of this magnitude. During COVID especially, we've seen the other side of police protection. The policeman that acts with the mentality of a militia or an overseer, an outsider to the community which they patrol. As a Lord of the Rings aficionado, I'm reminded of the ruffians and the sheriffs that swaggered around Hobbiton until the scouring of the Shire in the last chapter. It was cut from the films. The repeated failure over decades to address the grooming gang scandal is a sure sign that the British police has catastrophically failed as an institution. In the words of Michael Jackson, they don't really care about us. Let's return to George Greenwood's thread. There is also a big issue here, he notes, with police transparency. This is if we go back to the Twitter thread. Thank you. I requested copies of all UK police forces problem profiles in August 2020. Some of these forces' profiles showed failures, including that little evidence of the exploiters was being investigated. And then we quote from this article. There are a couple of points here to look at. Children are known to be at risk of abuse, have gone missing more than 55,000 times in Britain over the past 3 years, with some as young as 11. So tens of thousands of children being abused over 10 years after this was all broken.
Why 11? Do you have any idea?
No.
Because Muhammad, the perfect man, as Islam teaches, wanted to marry his favourite wife Aisha at 9 and had sex with her at 11.
I was not aware of that.
Married her at 6, apparently.
Police intelligence reports admit significant gaps in knowledge around child sexual exploitation and a failure by some officers to record any information about suspects. One teenager with learning disabilities was filmed being abused by a group of men, but police initially took no action because she claimed that it was consensual. So again, this was one of the problems we had at the start, was that children were coming out of this having been sexually abused, and the police weren't following up because they said, it's just a lifestyle choice for these children to be having sex with multiple adult Pakistani Muslim men. High Court judges have complained to the government that councils are keeping child victims of abuse in caravans because of a lack of space in regulated, secure children's homes. Forces tried to cover up the failings by redacting potentially embarrassing findings in reports during a 9-month freedom of information battle with reporters. So, again, the police are up to their old tricks. They're doing absolutely nothing, by the sounds of it, to make this any better, to tackle the problem. They seem to still have their head in the sand and are pretending this problem does not exist. Or if they aren't pretending that it doesn't exist, then their inactivity and incompetence is aiding and abetting it.
I have a correction to make. Apparently, it's at 9. He had sex with her.
So married at 6 and consummated at 9.
Yep. The only thing I'm reminded of, sorry, I'm being a bit quiet.
That's all right. No.
There's a segment we never released because of legal problems, in which me and Carl went through a document from the Home Office in which they listed a series of memes that they decided should be illegal. They as they described them, they were what was it? It was legal but dangerous, or legal but harmful, and they were saying this should be included in the online harms bill as stuff that should be made illegal. One of the images was of a British girl being raped by a Muslim man. It was a cartoon, and then in the background you can see the father getting dragged away by police with like rainbow lapels and all that. That is a cartoon that the British state wants censored under the grounds that it may cause terrorism.
Well, why might that be the case? Surely, if that had no representation in reality, it wouldn't have an effect.
Look at the priorities. They're worried about the cartoon, not the thing that is taking place in reality, as you say.
Yeah, it's outrageous. There's really no two ways about it. There's just lists. He goes through all of the forces and their shortcomings. A 2018 Nottinghamshire police report showed victims were left vulnerable because not all officers investigating child sexual exploitation were properly trained, meaning charging opportunities were missed. Bedfordshire Police's 2015 report showed it could not agree with councils in the area as to which children were actually at risk. A 2015 Cumbria Police report found some officers viewed victims as willing participants without properly checking the background of cases. Hampshire...
Children. We're talking about children.
Yeah.
Willing participants in sex. That doesn't exist.
In sex with adults.
By law, that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist, but the only time it does exist is when we're talking about ethnic minorities, apparently.
According to the police.
Hampshire Police's 2018 profile revealed that child exploitation warning notices, civil orders that ban a suspect from associating with a victim without having to go to trial, often simply led to the abuser approaching another child. Duh. Sussex Police's 2019 report revealed that many officers have little understanding of how important intelligence is, clearly, and may feel they do not have time to complete an intelligence log in relation to child sexual exploitation. Really, are we arguing that all of the failings here are technical and procedural? North Yorkshire Police found in 2017 that it was failing to flag offenders as being a risk to children until an offence was proven. Fabulous. Now, Sarah Champion MP has at least lived up to her name, despite being a Labour MP, and has spoken out on this issue, which is good. As she says here, South Yorkshire Police not recording ethnicity, illogical that they don't. It's a characteristic, much as a limp tattoo or hair colour when you're creating an offender profile. Why are police not collecting details? Presumably the results would be too inclusive for their liking. Well, finally, the news recently is that Priti Patel has come out and said that from now on, police must record the ethnicity of grooming suspects. From March, it will become mandatory for officers to record the ethnicity of people they arrest on suspicion of involvement in group-based child sexual exploitation. In 2019, police forces were told to keep a comprehensive record of suspects' biographical details. Home Office guidance said, all information, no matter how insignificant it may appear, can contribute to greater clarity around what are often extensive and complex exploitation networks. So, nearly 3 years ago now, they were told exactly, specifically, record everything you can about these people. And they were like, okay, yeah, but not race, not ethnicity. Interesting.
The thing in my mind, I was about to say it's nice that Priti Patel has said that you must do this now. But if they've been told before and they didn't do it, and now you're telling them again, what do you think is going to happen? They've already been told they're still not doing it.
Well, they might do it this time if it's mandated in law. But the problem is this is a very tiny procedural matter for the police that the Home Office can mandate. That the Home Office can mandate and force them to do something which is a basic common sense fundamental of their job. But that's one thing, and there are thousands of things that they do like this where they will just neglect if they are not directly mandated to do it. Yet again, politicians come out and address one of the tiny surface problems contributing to a national tragedy, while doing nothing to address the deep-rooted structural and cultural problems with the police that have caused it to fester. The police were not only able to do these things, they had been instructed to do so by Home Office guidance. Yet unless every detail of their job is made mandatory, in the case of protecting the people of this country, they simply will not do it. Yet again, the police shirk their duties.
The thing in my mind is this could not be a better argument for a situation where you have told an institution such as the police force, do this, they don't do it, you made it a legal requirement, great, wonderful. Quite frankly, I think you need to go into the police force all over the entire country and do a purge. And I mean a serious purge, and the individuals that immediately come to light are those politicizing the force itself.
Yeah.
Those in departments, we all know, diversity heads, all the rest of it, do not waste time with saying these things are not the case. These people have to be removed from their position and the position made redundant because they are not there to help the force run more efficiently.
Or
they
to
are there
protect the people.
They are there to poison it.
Yes.
And this is an example of their poison.
Absolutely. Very well said. I found this segment quite harrowing to put together. If you're a glutton for punishment, Romy Tobinson is releasing a trailer tomorrow for his feature Rape of Britain, which might cover this story in more detail. I believe he's quite active on Getter if you want to follow up on that.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this article here, The Staggering Exclusivity of Inclusivity from John Wheatley, in which he talks about the horrible exclusivity of the left. And as you can see, there is an audio track for silver and gold tier members. Also, if you'd like to find out what else is coming out on the website, you can always follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com, being the @. Thank you and goodbye.